So today I'm going to show you all of the tools that I use to make sourdough bread. I'm a huge advocate for using what you have in the kitchen, so I'm going to show you all the tools that I've accumulated over the years that make my process so much easier, but then I'm also going to show you alternatives that you likely already have in your kitchen so that you know, even if you want to make sourdough bread, you don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of brand new things in order to make it work for you. This is not a difficult process. There's just a few tools and tips that I like to have on hand in order to make the process go a little bit smoother. So I'm going to show you what mine are. I'm going to link all of them in the caption below, and then I'm also going to show you the alternatives so that you can be successful in your kitchen. You can choose to buy the ones that you think that will work best for you, and then use what you have on hand for the rest. Here's my collection of tools that I like to have on hand when I'm making my sourdough, when I'm feeding my starter, when I'm making my leaven, and all of that. So I'm going to go through each one individually and show you alternatives, if there is one, to the tools that I kind of have laid out in front here. Start with your starter. So I like to have a scale on hand. This is called it's an AccuChef scale. You can use any scale that has the tare option. You use this straight through the entire process. So when you're making your leaven, when you're making your dough, when you're feeding your starter, all of that. So I definitely suggest, first and foremost, going out and getting yourself a scale. It's really difficult to make good sourdough bread without weighing your ingredients, especially like for traditional sourdough bread. These are like 20 bucks. You can get them anywhere. So it doesn't have to be a fancy one. Just go out and get yourself a scale. So then the containers for your sourdough starter. So you'll see here that I have a few different options. When I first started making sourdough, I just fed my starter into a regular old Bernard mason jar, and it works just fine. So you can use a regular top to just set on the top, or you can use whatever you have to set on the top of it. This works just fine. Functionally, I don't love it as much because I find the lip a little bit tricky. So then I decided I would start using these. These are called weck jars. You can get them in packs of 6, I think, on Amazon maybe. This is the tulip weck jar, and it is a pint size. So I love this. It's beautiful. It looks nice on your counter, and you know, it's functional, very functional. But then eventually I started researching CROCKS, and way back when people used to make sourdough bread, they would use these sourdough CROCKS. It maintains the temperature inside of the starter really efficiently, so it ferments a lot more evenly, and it holds the ferment a lot better. So I had this one made for myself to try out. As you can see, it was definitely not the best manufacturer of the product, but I liked it and I used it. So I found someone that was able to manufacture them properly and in a way that really mimicked the functionality of the weck jar, but as a crock. And so these are the ones that we actually sell. We will have a pre-sale starting for these very soon that I will link on the website. I'll link the website below, and you can keep going on and check for the pre-sale. But these are wonderful. They have a really beautiful top on them, and they're super nice. So I'll just show you kind of quickly how it works. We're gonna feed the starter into the new crock, and functionally it just is so nice to work with. So you do this, you can do this with a jar, you can do this with your weck jar. You don't have to go out and buy anything fancy for this. If you have some jars at home, start your sourdough process. Don't wait. These work just fine. Actually, these are the perfect size for sourdough feed. It shouldn't overflow this if you're feeding my ratios into this. This is a pint. It's the same size as all of these ones. If you want to grab those, they're simple to find as well. Or if you want something a little bit more kind of like heirloom and collectible, you can grab yourself one of these. So it really doesn't make a difference. I like the crock again for the even fermentation of your starter, but it's not going to make your starter any better than feeding it into, you know, a mason jar. So these are your options, kind of from least expensive to most expensive. If you're looking to feed your sourdough starter, we have our jars, then our weck jars, and then our sort of heirloom sourdough crocks. So we have our scale and our starter crocks, and then obviously I like to have like either little scoops to scoop the flour out, or using just measuring spoons, and then, you know, your spoons as well. Okay, so then the next thing is the leaven. So if you follow my master recipe, when you make your sourdough starter, you're then going to make a supersized feed of that starter in order to make your bread, and that's called a leaven. And most sourdough recipes will call for that. So I like to have a larger jar. So if you look at this from the wet jar, I don't have larger CROCKS, someday maybe, but I just have larger wet jars. This is the Tulip. It is a liter, I believe. So you can see the difference between the two. So this is going to be used in order to feed your supersized feed of your starter to get, you know, your 300 or your 250 grams that you need for your starter to make your dough with. So I like to have some large liter jars. Alternatively, you can just use a Bix pickle jar or a liter size pickle jar or a liter size honey jar. Anything like that works just fine. You don't have to run out and buy a special jar. I like to have a lot of larger jars around for discard that I put in the fridge. So again, this is just an old pickle jar. I stick my my discard in this and I keep it in my fridge. But as far as a leaven, you can easily make your leaven in this as well. It's the same size as your pretty wet jar. And I have a couple different variations of this wet jar. Like I said, this one's called the Tulip. These ones are a little bit harder to find, what I'm finding. And this one, I'm not sure exactly what this one's called, but it looks more like a jar. I actually prefer the functionality of the Tulip a little bit better for whatever reason. The way that the glass kind of like bows out at the bottom, it's easier to stir it around. But both of these work fine for your discard and yeah, or just your liter size pickle jar. Cruising right along here, let's talk about what we're gonna actually make your sourdough in. So this is my absolute favorite bowl in the whole wide world. It was given to me by my mom. I'm sorry, I really don't have a link for this because I think it's a one-of-a-kind type of piece of pottery. But I like pottery bowls. You know, I have lots of different pottery bowls. This one also works nicely. This one's from the Food Nanny. Has like a nice green ring around it, and it is the proper size for my master recipe. So either of these bowls would work fine for the master recipe, but this one's by far my favorite. Alternatively, you can use a stainless steel bowl. That works perfectly fine. Or you can even use plastic. I don't love using plastic, but it's not gonna hurt your sourdough at all. So if you have like a big Tupperware bowl, I have made large batches of bread in Tupperware. So don't go out and buy anything fancy, but if you want a pretty bowl, you can get a nice pottery bowl. Anything really works. Glass, clay, stainless steel, plastic, they all work fine. So when you're working with your sourdough, I really love this. I don't actually own a mixer, like a KitchenAid mixer, so you can use a mixer to mix up your dough. But if you do not have one, this is an excellent tool to have. I will link this. It's from the Food Nanny store. I absolutely love using it to mix up the dough. I find that I have to use my hands a lot less when I'm using this. But if you don't want to go and buy one of these, you certainly don't have to go out and buy one of these in order to mix sourdough. If you have just like a regular old wooden spatula or spoon, or even just one of these spatulas, works just fine. So I like having one of these on hand to scrape my leaven out to put it into my bowl. I used to use just a wooden spoon to stir my dough, and you may just have to use your hands a little bit more, but like obviously that's totally fine. So most expensive to least expensive, probably this way, to be honest. The wooden one wasn't very much. This one, obviously functionality wise, but you know, for years I stirred just with these two as well. So for those, and then as far as a bowl goes, pottery or any of the other materials that I explained before. Let's talk about what you're putting underneath your bread when you're putting it into the oven. So we sell these beautiful bread mats, silicone bread mats. I absolutely love it. It prevents the bottom of my sourdough from burning as easily. And it's just a really nice thing to be able to use over and over and over again. These ones need to be rinsed off, but yeah, so I have a couple sets of these that I always have on hand, and it's nice. You could just push, like basically you take them and put them over top of your Banneton and you flip it upside down and the loaf comes out onto your bread mat, and then you just pick it up by the sides and slide it into the oven. So, and then these cool down really quickly so you can lift them right out of your Dutch oven when the bread comes out of the oven as well. So I really like these, but I didn't use these for years and years and years. I used good old parchment paper. So if you are not in the market to purchase bread mats, you can easily take your Banneton basket, put it on, or put the parchment paper on top, flip it out, and you know, away you go, and you have your loaf right on top there, and then you can just use the sides of the parchment paper to lift it and put it into your Dutch oven. So more expensive to least expensive, we have our bread mats, or we have simple old parchment paper. This is actually white parchment paper. If you can get your hands on brown parchment paper that isn't bleached, that's preferable. And then you can also fold it over twice like this, and that kind of helps it from burning quite as much on the bottom. So definitely don't run out and buy anything that you don't need to go out and buy, but I will link these. We are sold out, but we are restocking, and I will link them, and you can grab yourself a set of them. Let's talk about Banneton baskets. Banneton baskets are something that if you're gonna go out and spend any money on anything, buy Banneton baskets. It really makes or breaks the shape of your bread, and you can't convince me otherwise. I know people use bowls and that sort of thing, but just remember when you're proofing your dough, it's gonna take on whatever shape you put it in. So I really love Banneton baskets, and I'm gonna show you, you know, the more expensive and the least expensive way to go about doing that. So these ones, I'm gonna tell you the sizes that I would suggest. So these ones are just from Amazon. There's like the regular linen lined Banneton basket. You can get them without the liners as well. I like the liners for these particular styles. This is the 10-inch and this is a 7-inch. I know it seems really small, but just trust me on that. Get yourself a 7-inch basket. Make sure it's a little deeper, but the 7-inch basket gives you the perfect bowl. For my master recipe anyways, and actually even larger recipes that I've made. This is the perfect size. I would go up to 8 inches, but no higher than that. If you go higher than that, this is a 10-inch basket, and your dough tends to just spread out and get flat. So I don't suggest 10 inches. I suggest either 7 or 8 for the round, and 10 inches for the oval from end to end. So those are, you can get them in packs of 2 on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive, and I highly suggest not skipping this. I suggest getting Banneton baskets. If you really want to go the extra mile, you can get the paper pulp baskets. These are from Rose Hill Sourdough. I will link them. These are incredible. I just started using them probably a little over a year ago, and I can't go back. I have a really hard time now using these ones, and I will if I need to make a circle, but if I'm not making a boule and I'm doing, you know, a batard, then I reach for these. The reason for that is because the paper pulp sort of sucks the moisture out of the dough or the loaf. So it creates sort of like this hardness when it's sitting in here. It dries it out a little bit more, where these ones do the opposite. We don't want to develop a crust, so it has like the perfect amount of airflow in order to form your dough to this shape. And so when you dump it out onto your bread mat or your parchment paper, it holds its shape so much nicer than the other ones do. So I love these. They are more expensive, but if you are, you know, looking to splurge on some Banneton baskets, definitely suggest grabbing a couple of these. I really can't say enough good things about them. But if you're not looking to spend a bunch of money on buying new things, these work perfectly fine too. I used these for like, you know, almost a decade. So, and my bread worked fine. I'm just showing you kind of like ways that make my system a little bit more fun, and these definitely do that for me. Let's talk about vessels to cook your sourdough in. So these are Dutch ovens. This one's my absolute favorite one that I've ever used. It is a combo cooker from Lodge. It is 10.25 inches, and I use it upside down. So when I put my sourdough into the oven, I preheat it like this. And then what I do is I just lift this off, and I set my loaf right on top. So I just set my whether it's an oval or a circle, this works for ovals and circle loaves. And same with this cooker. I use this for both oval and round. So I just stick it in like that, and then I put this back on top. And then once it's halfway through the bake and I'm ready to take the cover off, what I love is I just lift that off, and then the loaf just sits in that. And once it's done cooking, I can just pick it up and take it off. So this is an awesome thing to have. It's really not that expensive. You can get them on Amazon. I can link the Canadian one. I'll try to find the one for US as well. In the US, they're quite a bit cheaper than they are here in Canada. I don't know what they are. I think maybe like 75 bucks. Like, they're really not a lot. And I use it for lots of other things too, because you can flip it over and use it just as like a regular kind of Dutch oven with a pot. Okay, so there's that one. And then I also have this one, which is another type of combo cooker, but it is a larger pot. So it's supposed to kind of set like that. But again, I use it upside down. So I don't love this one as much because it doesn't have a handle, but you know, it's fine. You just use 2 oven mitts and you lift the cover off. Same thing, put your loaf of bread in the center there, put the cover back on. I've been using these for like 10 years. They are not expensive vessels. You don't have to go buy like a $350 Dutch oven or whatever they cost. These are really cost effective. You know, they need to be oiled, but other than that, they work just fine. So highly recommend these if you're in the market to buying a Dutch oven and you need something a little bit more cost effective to purchase. If you're thinking, I really don't want to go out and buy a Dutch oven, or maybe you don't have anywhere to keep it or anything like that, or maybe you're somebody that's like, I just can't, like my grandmother, she's like, I really just can't lift that out of my oven. It's so hard for her to lift this giant Dutch oven out of her oven. So if that's the case, just use a loaf pan. So all sourdough recipes can be made into oval loaves and put right in a loaf pan and baked like that. I would suggest putting parchment paper underneath, and then you know, you do have the bake covered. Sometimes I'll cover it with some tin foil, and it's not exactly like a crusty loaf of sourdough that you're gonna get in your Dutch oven, but it's the same recipe, it's the same fermentation, and it tastes great. So if you're somebody that's like, I'm not going out and buying a huge Dutch oven, or I don't want to lift it out of my oven, you can just cook it in a loaf pan. Alternatively, you can also take a cast iron pan and you can use steam in the oven, and there's lots of ways to do that. Maybe I'll try to do a video on using steam in the oven, and you can just cook it right on this. So cook it open without the cover, and then it's a lot less heavy for you to go in and try to lift it out, and you're just removing the steam halfway through rather than like this giant cover. So if you already have a cast iron pan that you could preheat in the oven and just cook in that, that's an option as well. I find the Dutch oven to be really consistent in the bake. I like it because you know, there's no guesswork. It's just the same every single time. I cook it for, you know, 22 minutes with the cover on and about 15 to 17 minutes with it off, and you know, it works almost every single time. So I do like the Dutch oven for that reason, because it's so consistent, especially with ovens. They tend to lose a lot of heat when the door opens, and these will keep that heat. So it's just a really great way of always having kind of a consistent bake. But again, there's always alternatives, and you don't have to go out and buy a brand new Dutch oven if you want to make sourdough bread. So last but not least, these are optional because technically you could use a sharp knife to score your loaves, but I absolutely love using a bread lame. Now, the other option that you could do as well, you can take these right out of the, I'll show you how to use this here. You can take this right out of its kind of like container, and you could just simply use this. So you can buy these super cheap on Amazon. The Astra brand is a really good brand, and you get like a pack of 12 or something like that. So you don't technically need to use a bread lame, but you know, these are very sharp. I've cut myself way more times than I want to admit. And so I like having this on here because it protects, you know, it protects me, and it's a nice way to store it. So, and you can switch them in and out. So I love this little lame. for scoring my loaves. As you can see, it just twists off and then you can switch the blade out. So usually what I'll do is I'll use this side of the blade and then I'll swap it and then I'll swap it again to the other side. So I have like basically four blades in one. And then it comes, like I bought this cute little pouch from Wire Monkey Shop to go with it. And I will link their shop below. I can't remember, I think this is the UFO blade or something. Anyway, this one is my absolute favorite. It's really lightweight, it works really nicely. This one's also from them. It has a kind of cover that is magnetic, so it fits right back on. I like this one as well. I don't use it as much, but for like straight scores down the side of your loaf, this one works really nicely and does a really nice angle on it. And that blade, this just twists and the blade comes right out, same thing. So these are the two that I have from the Wire Monkey Shop. I have used ones from Amazon. I don't like them as much. I don't find that they work as well, and they're too bulky. So if anything, if you're going to invest in any lame, I would get this one because it's nice and small, nice and compact. You can do really nice intricate designs, or you can do one big design or one big score down the side of your loaf. This is the one that I mainly use. This is my workhorse that I use kind of mostly for all of my loaves. Thanks for watching. I hope that inspires you to make sourdough regardless of what you have in your kitchen, and knowing that you don't have to go out and buy all brand new things in order to be successful with your sourdough bread. I will link all of these tools down in the captions, so be sure to check that out and make sure to subscribe for more videos.